What's going on YouTube? It is Repost, back with another video. In today's video, I have my Premier League predictions for the upcoming season, the 25-26 season. Um, the end of last season saw Liverpool lift the title, Arsenal come second as always, Manchester City finished third, Chelsea finished fourth, and Manchester United all the way down in 15th. We have newly promoted sides such as Sunderland, Burnley, and who's Leeds United. Those are the three promoted sides. So, let's just jump straight into it. Let's see who I have finishing bottom, and that is Burnley. As you can see in the top left, I have their important fixtures lists. It begins at home to Tottenham, but I think majority of it is after that fixture, starting on January 31st, when you have Sunderland, West Ham, Crystal Palace, Brentford, Everton, and Bournemouth all in a 7-game stretch. Obviously, Chelsea is there in the middle. You can probably throw those 3 points away, but to stay up, I think you need to, at least get 9 points uh, in these games. Obviously, Bournemouth lost Sabayarni and Hoyson as well as Kirkish, so they're losing a big piece of their back line. Obviously, Brentford lost pretty much their entire squad and lost their manager. Everton's a really tough fixture, but I don't know how they're going to perform this season. I'm very high on Everton. Crystal Palace haven't really brought in anyone, haven't let anyone really go, so same squad as last year might be easy to prepare against. Sunderland, another promoted side, you should always be gunning for points against them. And then West Ham, I just don't know how good they'll be this season with Graham Potter at the helm. As you can see for their incomings in their arrivals, Leslie Ugochukwu is there from Chelsea as well as Bashir Humphreys. They're missing one more from Chelsea on transfer market. It is Armando Broja, who actually went to Burnley as well, the striker from Chelsea. Um, got Chuanya from Lazio, got Marcus Edwards from Sporting, who's a great player. Jaden Anthony, Hartman from Feyenoord, Zian Fleming, they made permanent. Max Wade to be their goalkeeper after you can see James Trafford headed over to Manchester City. Egan Riley left on a free, which is a big loss. Obviously, one of their top defenders, along with Esteve, which may head over to Tottenham. Um, got Twanzebe, one of the Ipswich defenders from last season. And then got Kyle Walker to be that experience in the squad that they need. So I'd say, most of their business was positive. I'd say Leslie Ugochukwu is a great buy, a midfielder with loads of potential at that center mid position. Bashir Humphreys was on loan with them last season. Marcus Edwards has always been consistent and good for Sporting. I think that's a good buy for the Wings. Zian Fleming just made permanent from Millwall, was decent at that striker position last season. Max Weeb, I think, is going to start at goalkeeper for them this season. And then I expect Kyle Walker to get a lot of minutes. Obviously, still a very good defender, just not a Manchester City level defender anymore. Heads over to Burnley to get some game time and try to help them stay up. Moving on to our 19th position, I have Brentford. This may come to a surprise to many, as obviously they've been in the league for a multitude of years, but you see the business they've done. Doesn't really excite me. I think Kelleher's a good goalkeeper. I think Coyote is a good defender. Malambo, I'm yet to see. Haven't really watched much of him, so I'm not going to place an opinion on him yet. Um, Jordan Henderson came for a free. I don't know how much he'll play, but as you can see on the outgoings, lost their starting goalkeeper in Mark Flecken, which is why you get Kelleher. Loser starting center mid in Christian Norgard, your club captain. Loser top goal scorer in Brian Mbeumo, and it just doesn't seem like you've replaced them as of yet. As you can see here, they're important fixtures. Yes, Arsenal is there, but it starts post Arsenal. You have a run of Brighton, Burnley, Bournemouth, Wolves, Leeds, Everton, and Fulham, which you need to, be on form for, get a lot of points from to stay up. Same thing with Burnley. You need maybe a little bit more. You need 12 to 15 points in those games against those 7 opposition. And I think that is possible. I think you could get easily 9 from Burnley, Wolves, and Leeds if you're competitive in those games. I think you can get 3 from Fulham at home. You could get 3 from Everton at home. Bournemouth away is a little tough. I think Brighton at home is a little bit easier than Bournemouth away. So, we'll see how they perform in those games, but those are their most important fixtures. Yeah, I just don't really think their business has been great. And I think their biggest departure would be losing Thomas Frank to Tottenham. And replacing him with Keith Andrews, who doesn't really excite me as an option. So, yeah, I'll see how he does tactically in the Premier League. I don't know if he'll really be up for it. And yeah, I kind of expect Brentford to be the first team from the Premier League to be headed back down to the Championship after it's always been 3 up, 3 down. I think Brentford breaks that trend and is the first team from the Premier League to head down to the Championship. Headed over to 18th, I have Leeds United. a lot of their business has been decent. Sean Longstaff there, obviously a very experienced center mid. Uh, I think can even play um, center half if you really, really need him to, but I doubt. Gonna play majority of center mid for Leeds United, and I expect him to get a lot of time there. Maximilian Wilbur heads to Werder Bremen on a loan. I think a pretty decent left back. Lucas Mecha, a decent striker from Wolfsburg, headed over there. Most of their business I'm not too familiar with. Anton Stach seems like a decent signing, though. Um, but I don't know Jacob Bijol from Unites. I don't know Lucas Perry from Lyon. And then I don't know Gabriel Goodmanson, so I'm not going to comment on them. But spent a decent sum of money this transfer window, 85.4 million euros, only 6 million euros going out. Um, but as you can see for their important fixtures, this is easily the easiest run of their season. You got Fulham. It's towards the beginning of their season too, so you could see Leeds probably standing at the mid-table in November just because of how easy this run is. You have Fulham away, which is not an easy fixture, but then you have Wolves, and then you have Bournemouth and Tottenham at home, which I think is really plays into Leeds' favor. Then you have Burnley and West Ham. Burnley away, but I think you should be able to get 3 points there, and I think West Ham at home you should be able to put up a fight with, and then Brighton and Nottingham Forest, which are two little more difficult fixtures, but I think something that Leeds can be competitive in. I think all 8 of these fixtures Leeds have the ability to be competitive in. Maybe Tottenham just a little bit less than everything else because I do think Tottenham will be a very good side headed into the season compared to last. Obviously not Champions League football quality, but I think somewhere up around the top or the top top part of the mid table area. But yeah, very important run of fixtures for Leeds at the beginning of their season. Really, really plays into their favor well while every team is trying to settle into their tactics. Maybe they're already set, retain their manager. I don't know if that will be a good idea or not. Maybe he's the first one to get sacked. But maybe the tactics he already has in place allows them to push on early on in the league, and this is very early on in the league, so maybe they're able to, um, you know, go on a run in these 8 fixtures. Obviously, spreads across September and October, and even the beginning of November. But um, I think Leeds have a very good chance to stay up if they do well in these games. Obviously, if you get a point from Fulham, if you get 3 from Wolves, point from Bournemouth, maybe not anything from Tottenham, but then you get 3 in a row against Burnley and West Ham, then that's 6, 7, 10, 11 points in 6 games, which is pretty good record. And then you could maybe get 1 or 2 from Brighton and Leeds, which would be great for their run, be great for them to stay up. That's very important run of fixtures right there for Leeds. I think they're gonna have to be on it if they want to stay up in those games. Moving on to 17th, I actually have West Ham. People are probably like, "Where's Sunderland?" You'll see them soon. Don't worry. For West Ham, they made Jean-Claire Todibo a permanent deal, but I think their best piece of business is actually getting Kyle Walker-Peters from Southampton. I think he's a great player. Got him for a free. One big outgoing is Mohamed Kudus. He headed over to Tottenham with to pair up with Thomas Frank for 64 million euros. I think it was around 60 million pounds or so. You get Callum Wilson to be a striker on a free. Probably to back up Nicholas Fulkrug, who looked great in preseason, to be honest. Aaron Cresswell, a youngster, heads to Stoke City for a free. Kufal heads to Hoffenheim on a free as well. Fabian's, Fabianski leaves without a club. Danny Ings leaves without a club. I expect him to go to the championship. Zuma and Mikel Antonio, who is now a pundit, is without a club as well. A lot of incomings on the U21s as well. Not really anything important, but um, yeah, I think Diouf will be a great option at that left back position as well. I forgot to talk about him. He looked great in preseason. Headed over from Slavia Prague, was tracked by AC Milan, just didn't end up going there. Headed over to West Ham, but I do think he's a great left back. Think he's a great pairing with Aaron Wan-Bissaka on the other side, and I hope Jean-Claire Todibo has better form than he did last season because that's very important for West Ham. But as you can see, these fixtures I think are very important to West Ham. I think they could be competitive against Brighton, competitive against Wolves, probably get 3 points there. Uh, Competitive against Forest, London Derby against Tottenham, never going to count them out in that, or that London Derby against Chelsea. Home against Man United, I think that's a winnable game. I think home against Sunderland and away against Burnley are 2 games that you need to amass a good amount of points from. So yeah, that's that on West Ham. I think they do stay up, and I don't think it's very close between 18th and 17th. To be honest, I think it might be decided um, with a couple games left in the season, but we'll see. Maybe there is a relegation battle. But yeah, that is that on West Ham. Moving over to 16th, and this is where I play Sunderland. You can see Joe Bellingham went to Borussia Dortmund, big loss. Tom Watson, the guy who scored the winning goal in the championship playoff final, headed over to Brighton for 12 million euros as well. But their business, in my opinion, has been great. Habib Diarra, center half, or not center half, center mid from Strasbourg, excuse me, heads in for 31.5 million euros. Really, really good player. Really showed flashes at Strasbourg. I watch a lot of Strasbourg as a Chelsea fan. Obviously our sister club. But he heads over to Sunderland to play in the Premier League. I think it's a great move for him. I think he'll get a lot of game time there. Simon Dingra. Obviously Brighton fans aren't too keen on him. Yeah, I don't know why, to be honest. I think, he shows flashes here and again. I think if he shows more effort, then he will be a very good player for Sunderland. But I think, this midfield three, Enzo Lafitte, Adingra, and Habib Diarra that all came in this summer is, very important to them. And then you also get Granit Xhaka to be a midfielder as well. So, a lot of tactical flexibility in that midfield for Sunderland incoming. I think Xhaka is easily their best buy. Experienced, one of the best DMs in the world when he was at Leverkusen. Yeah, I don't know how they, got that move. Robin Rose to be their new goalkeeper. Obviously, they needed that. Um, they do need to improve their back line, but I think the goalkeeper was a major concern, and they get Robin Rose to come in. Mark Guiu heads in to be a striker option as well. Um, yeah, really, really good youngster in Mark Guiu. Um, yeah, someone I really like. I think someone that should get a lot of game time there. Also, Talby, another forward. I think they do need to improve their defense. That is one thing I'll say about Sunderland is if they're gonna stay up, I anticipate them, you know, improving their defense. I think Siddiqui can play there, but he's also center mid at the same time. So I don't know where they'll choose to play him. I think he's predominantly a midfielder. He's just someone that can step in that defensive role if he needs to. And then Ronaldo Mandava is a left back, I believe. Heads over from to Sunderland on a free from um, Atletico Madrid. Sorry, I just completely blinked. Yeah, left back gonna strengthen up their defense. I expect them to get a decent amount of game time there, but I do expect Sunderland to bolster that defense headed into the season. And I think that's the way that they will stay up. But as you can see, the important fixtures really play into their strengths. You go at home to West Ham, which I think is a winnable game for you. And then this is actually the start of the season, so their important run of fixtures begins at the start of the season. You start with West Ham, Burnley, Brentford, Crystal Palace. I think that's games you could all be competitive in and win a majority of. And then you also probably lost to Aston Villa, but then you have Forest, Man United, and Wolves that I think you can be competitive in all those games too. I really don't know how Man United's going to start the season. I would expect them to beat Sunderland at the beginning of the season though, just because I do think that's going to be a must-win for them with the tough run of fixtures they have to begin. But yeah, that's that on Sunderland. I actually do have them staying up. Might be a little controversial for majority of y'all, but I'll just move on to 15th. Wolves. They bring in Jorgen Strand Larson on a permanent. They get Fer Lopez also from Celta de Vigo. For 23 million euros. John Arias from Fluminense for 17 million euros. Really, really good player in the Club World Cup. And then they get David Muller-Wolf from AZ Alkmaar for 12 million euros. Giga went to Rangers. He's still there. I don't know why that's that. But Mateus Cunha, Ryan Nori both leave the club. I think that's most of their important business. Um, Two of their best players last season headed out the club, so I don't know if they'll stay up, but I think their manager is the main reason they stay up. I think Vitor Pereira is very good at what he does, and I think he was excellent when he came into Wolves last season. Um, yeah, their important fixtures start with Bournemouth near the beginning of the season. I think week match day 2. Start with Bournemouth, then to Everton, probably lost against Newcastle, but then you have Leeds, you have Burnley and Sunderland all in that 5 game stretch between September 20th and October 25th. You have Tottenham and Brighton in the middle, but I think those are games you could be competitive in as long as the incomings, the replacements to Mateus Cunha, which I'm guessing is John Arias, are impressing and on good form. I don't was Ryan Nori that cheap? Maybe there's a lot of add-ons in that deal, but I have no idea. You lose Semedo to a free. You lose Tommy Doyle on loan. Obviously came from Manchester City. I think he's a decent player. Chiquinho, a winger slash right mid with loads of potential, heads to Alverca with on a free transfer. and then Gonçalo Guedes to Real Sociedad for 4 million euros. Yeah, I think Wolves will be consistent enough throughout the season to stay up, so I think 15th is a great spot for them. Moving on to 14th, I have Fulham. They have done no business this window. They bought in a backup goalkeeper in Benjamin Lecomte from Montpellier for 500,000 euros, not even 500 million. That would have been insane, but um, yeah, did no business this window, just retaining the same squad. Obviously, in for Raheem Sterling, in for Reece Nelson, so we can see how that progresses. But their important fixtures, you see, you have Crystal Palace, Burnley, Nottingham Forest, West Ham, Crystal Palace again, and then you have two hard games versus Liverpool and Chelsea, both at home though, so I think you can be competitive in those games. And then you have Leeds. So yeah, I think you could, if you do something against Crystal Palace, at least one of the two games, it's great. Um, Pick up points against West Ham, against Fulham, against Burnley and Leeds. I think that's a great run for y'all. I do expect y'all to drop points against Liverpool, and then Chelsea is always up in the air because we don't know how they'll do against Chelsea. Obviously, lost it at the end at home last season, but then won it away at Chelsea in the 92nd minute. So, you know, really tough to tell how Fulham will perform against Chelsea this season. It's always up and down. But yeah, I think that's their important run of fixtures if they want to stay around the mid-table, and that's what I expect them to do in 14th. Moving on to 13th, I have the Cherries. I have Bournemouth. Bought in Dorde Petrovic to be their starting goalkeeper for around 29 million euros, and then bought in Adrian Truffert from Stade Rennes to be their new left back after Milos Karkas left the club. On their departures, they have Dean Huijsen to Real Madrid, Milos Karkas to Liverpool, Jaden Anthony to Burnley, Joe Rothwell to Rangers, who's actually been excellent for them, as well as Max Aarons, who's been very good for Rangers as well, and Mark Travers hits to Everton as well. One more outgoing that happened today was Ilez Abayarni to PSG, another center half. So you lose pretty much your entire back line besides your right back. Um, in this transfer window in Hoyson, Kirkus, and Zabayarni. So, I expect it to be a tough season for the Cherries headed into next. Um, but as you can see, they're important fixtures. You start with Aston Villa, which I think is a loss. But after that, I do think, you have potential for a lot of points here between West Ham, Sunderland, Everton, Man United, Burnley, and Brentford. I think Chelsea's a little bit of a tough fixture, but Bournemouth at Bournemouth away for any team is a difficult fixture, so that's why that's in there. I think Bournemouth could even get a point from Chelsea. Almost did last season before Christopher Nkunku scored in the 87th minute, but um, yeah, I think this is a very important run of fixtures if they do want to stay mid-table, which I expect them to. I think Areola is a good enough manager to, you know, have their recruitment, bring in two new center halves, and then then be able to hit the ground running. Look decent in the USA tour, but I do think they need to find another gear. And I think they could get 3 points against West Ham, Sunderland, Everton, even Man United, which I don't think they will, but Brentford and Burnley as well. So that's 15 points right there. I expect them to stay mid-table. So yeah, that's that on Bournemouth. That's why I have them finishing in 13th. Moving on to 12th, I have Nottingham Forest, a big drop off from last season where they finished 7th, but um, yeah, I just don't really know where to place them. I feel like teams started figuring them out at the end of the season, and they just started having a crisis. Obviously, was able to keep hold of Morgan Gibbs White, but I'm pretty sure you're holding him hostage. So, yeah, there's that. But you let go of Anthony Lenga. Danilo went back to Botafogo. Ramon Sosa headed over to Palmeiras. Andrew Elmo Bamidele went to Strasbourg, obviously our sister club. Matt Turner headed to Lyon. I don't know if he's going to start there. Obviously, they almost faced relegation, but were able to stay up after appealing. On the incomings, Dan Ndoye from Bologna, really, really good signing. Winger for 42 million euros. Igor Jesus, striker from Botafogo, looked really good in the Club World Cup for 12 or 19 million euros, and then you also pair him with Jair Cunha from Botafogo for 12 million euros, and then you get Angus Gunn to be a backup goalkeeper from Norwich. As you can see for their important fixtures, it's a very easy run. You have Brentford, you have Crystal Palace, you have West Ham. Hard fixture against Arsenal, but then you have Burnley and then you have Sunderland. So I expect them to kind of get 15 and 18 or somewhere around there. I think you could probably draw a game against Crystal Palace or West Ham, but those other games I do expect them to kind of win. So yeah, that's pretty much their important run of fixtures. I think if you get the amount of points that Bournemouth do in 8 games in these 6 games, then you have a good chance of finishing above them. So that's why I have Nottingham Forest in 12th. Moving on to 11th, I have Crystal Palace. Again, no business. Got Walter Benitez on a free and brought in Borna Sosa from Ajax for 2 million, and yeah, pretty much just let go of free transfers and loan transfers. So Not much to talk about for Crystal Palace. It's the same squad as always. Seems like they're keeping Eze. Seems like they're keeping Mateta. Um, so we'll just talk about the important fixtures. You have Crystal Palace, or no, excuse me. You have Everton. You have Bournemouth. Hard game against Arsenal. And then you have Brentford, Brighton, Wolves, which I think are three games you can be very competitive in. And I think, home against Man United, you can always do something against, as well as away to Burnley. So yeah, I think, if they capture a decent amount of points in these fixtures pretty early on in the season, so obviously um, they're retaining their manager for the third season. I'm blanking on his name. He came from Frankfurt. Um, what's their manager's name? I'm actually blanking right now. I'm not a casual, I promise. Um, yeah, what is his name? I'm actually blank. I don't know why I'm blanking, but I just am. Um, Oliver Glasner. There we go. Um, yeah, obviously, if Oliver Glasner, who has been here for a multitude of years, just won the FA Cup with them, stays, then um, I expect them to start off very well in the Premier League, and I think this is pretty early on in the season. So they will be able to kick on from these games. Um, and just have good form headed into the middle part of the season as well as the later parts of the season. So that's why I expect Crystal Palace to finish 11th. Headed on to 10th, which may be a little controversial to y'all, but this is where I had Manchester United. Bringing in Buemo, bringing Cunha, bringing in Diego Leon, who is a excellent talent. Let go of Marcus Rashford on a loan deal. Expected to let go of who Garnacho. Excuse me. I saw Chelsea's logo there and I just completely blanked, but then remembered it's Garnacho. Um, but also bringing in Shesko, which I think is a yet to be seen deal, I guess, more than anything. Um, but yeah, for Manchester United, done good business. I like Emblemo. I like Cunha. I just don't know how they're going to pay it back. I think they're going to need to let go of a lot of players, but they're not a great selling club. So, we'll see. But um, if they're able to get the players in, they're able to get the players in. I don't know how Amarim's really going to use them because Cunha walks the most in the Premier League, and Amarim wants intensity. And Buemo, I don't know if they're going to play him in the attacking mid or the striker. Obviously, you just brought in Shesko, so I don't know if you're going to make a front three of Cunha, and Buemo, and Shesko, and put Embuemo on that right wing instead of that right forward. But yet to be seen. I think Amarim will be able to manage it because I think Cunha can play on the left and Buemo on the right, and then Shesko up top. For their important fixtures, it starts at the beginning of the season. You can see this run of fixtures they have. It's absolutely awful for them. Start off against Arsenal. I expect that to be a loss. Against Fulham away, maybe a draw, maybe a win against Burnley. But then you have Man City away. I think that's a loss. I think Chelsea's a loss. Brentford should be a win. Sunderland should be a win, and then Liverpool, I expect it to be a loss. So you have what I say 9 points in 8 games to start the season. I don't think that's good enough for Manchester United, to be honest. Obviously, it won't just be 9 points. It may be less. It may be more. Maybe they draw against Chelsea like they always do. Maybe they get a freak result against Man City. Maybe they beat Fulham. Maybe they get a freak result against Arsenal as well as Liverpool. It's Manchester United. They could really pull a result out against anyone, but I expect this to be the hardest run of their season at the beginning of the season. Obviously, have a very hard end to it as well. So we'll just see how they do throughout the season. But I think, it's most important for them to start well. If they don't start well, then I don't expect them to have a good season at all because I think there's going to be too much pressure on the squad as well as the manager to do something. So, I'm anticipating not them starting too hot, and I think that's why, at the end of the day, they won't have as great of a season. It's an improvement from 15th, don't get me wrong, 10th, but still not a great season. I just think need a lot in that midfield as well as that defense as well as the goalkeeping department to really push on next season. Um, Obviously in for Carlos Baleba, but I don't know without outgoings how you really get him through the door, and it doesn't seem like you're selling anyone other than Garnacho, and you can't really fund Baleba with Garnacho after you just spent another 70 or 85 million on Sheshko in terms of euros. Obviously, that's including add-ons, but the add-ons are easily achievable. So, we'll see what Manchester United do on the outgoings department. Just haven't really done much besides send Marcus Rashford to Barcelona on a loan with an option to buy. Um, Moving on to ninth. This is where I have Everton. Yep, up the Toffees. Really, really good business this summer. I, I love what they've done, to be honest. I think one of their most underrated signings is Adam Asnou from Bayern Munich. I think he's going to be a very good player for them. Finally get rid of Neil Maupay, who heads to Marseille for 4 million euros. I think that happened a while ago. Um, Ashley Young heads to Ipswich, one of their, I think, was the oldest player in the Premier League. Dominic Calvert-Lewin leaves for free. Yet to see where he goes. Maybe he goes to an Aston Villa, who we will talk about later in this video. But other than that, you bring in Carlos Alcaraz, who looked great at the end of last season. Obviously, was a loan with an option to buy for 15 million euros, which I think is a very cheap deal. You bring in one of my favorite signings of the summer, Tierno Barry from Villarreal, one of the youngest strikers in the league with loads of potential. I think 21 or so. Tall, can strike the ball well, good hold up play. I think just a very good all around striker, and I expect him to get a lot of game time for Everton this season after Dominic Calvert-Lewin did leave the club. And then you get KDH, who I think is a great bit of business. Obviously, one of the fan favorites at Chelsea, didn't really play that much, but a fan favorite just because you know was always professional, always did his role, scored a lot of goals in the Conference League, scored a goal in the Club World Cup as well. Just a top professional while he was at Chelsea, and I think everyone is wishing him well. And I hope he succeeds over there at Everton. And whoa, I completely messed this up. I will be back in a second because that is not Everton's important fixtures. Okay, now we're back. With the correct fixtures list. This is actually Everton's team, not these Crystal Palace fixtures that I had on that. Oh, not even these Crystal Palace fixtures that I had on their page by accident. These are the important Everton fixtures. It's actually their starting 10 games of the season, in my opinion. Um, Go away to Leeds to begin the season, and then you're at home to Brighton, and then I don't know why on Safari it had Wolverhampton Casuals instead of Wolverhampton Wanderers, but yeah, you play them August 30th. Then you have two hard tests against Villa and Liverpool, Merseyside derby, and then a hard test against Villa at home. Then you stay at home to West Ham and then Crystal Palace as well. So you don't leave the city of Liverpool between September 13th and October 4th. And then you head over to Manchester, which is a very close drive on October 13th. Home to Tottenham on October 25th, and then you play Sunderland away on November 1st. So, you play two of the newly promoted sides in Leeds and Sunderland in your first 10 games. Then you play a Wolverhampton team, which is not great, as well as a West Ham team that's not great. Then you have two very decent teams in Crystal Palace and Brighton, as well as Villa. And then you have three of the big six in Liverpool, Tottenham, and Man City. The reason why I say these are important fixtures are because you need to prove yourself in these games against Liverpool, as well as Man City, as well as Tottenham, even Villa. And then you're gonna have those tough battles against Palace in Brighton, and even West Ham to an extent. But I think your squad's a lot better than Sunderland, Leeds, and Wolverhampton. So that's why I expect you to be very well off to begin the season with these 10 fixtures, and I think they are very important for you to kick on the rest of the season. So yeah, that's why I have Everton in a very high ninth compared to where they've been in the last season. But I think David Moyes has done a great job there. Headed over to eighth, and this is where I have Spurs. I have, their important fixtures in starting in October, ending in December, beginning with Leeds, then home to Aston Villa, away to Everton, which I just talked about, home to Chelsea, then you have Manchester United, then you have Arsenal, then you have Fulham, and then you have Newcastle. So very, very tough five fixtures, six, seven, actually seven fixtures of those eight are very difficult. Villa's a tough side. Everton away is never going to be easy. Chelsea away to Tottenham. It's 3 point lane for Chelsea. Manchester United Tottenham is always going to be a tough game. Obviously, it's two squads at very similar parts of the project. I think Tottenham are a little bit ahead because I do rate Thomas Frank as a manager a lot, and I think their business this summer has been a lot better than Manchester United's, to be honest. Just on they already have a decent midfield. They already have a decent squad to begin with, and I think if Thomas Frank really refines that, then he'll be better off than Manchester United. Um, North London derby against Arsenal, never easy. London derby against Fulham, and then you head over to Newcastle, which I think is probably the toughest fixture in the league for the London sides. But as you can see, for their incomings and outgoings, Højbjerg heads to Marseille. Mikey Moore went to Rangers on a loan transfer, so I'm excited to see how he does there because I do watch a lot of Scottish football, in particular Rangers as well. Son heads to LAFC. Had a press conference where the lady was telling him that we brought you in to play in the World Cup next season for the USA, and he was like, yeah, sure, whatever. But in the arrivals, you bring in Mohamed Kudus, which I think is great business, as well as bringing Mateus Tell on a permanent deal. Obviously, it was on loan there. Vuskovic from Hajduk Split, one of the center halves with the most potential in the world, in my opinion. So I do think that's great business. As well as Joao Polina, I think can really bring solidity into the midfield for 5 million euros on a loan deal. Kevin Danso, obviously a very good center half. I think Tottenham had him a while ago. Maybe not. I could be tweaking. Maybe the name just sounds familiar, but was very, very good for Lens. Tottenham bring him for a permanent deal on 25 million euros. Him and the other center half, I can't remember his name, were very, very good for Lens. Obviously, not going to look too great next season. So, maybe the idea of bringing in a French center half to Lens would be enticing after losing Kevin Danso to Tottenham because their back line was great and Kevin Danso was a great part of that. So, yeah, I like the business Tottenham have done this season. I think it would have been a lot better if they were able to bring in Morgan Gibbs White as well, but they weren't. Marinakis held him hostage and said, you know, you're staying here or else we're suing Tottenham. Um, so yeah, I think Tottenham are gonna have a great season. I think Thomas Frank is their biggest rival. I do think he's a great manager. I think people underrate him a lot. I think he's really gonna solidify Tottenham in that back line, and I think that's what they needed the most. Probably sacrificing a lot of attack for defense, but I can see Tottenham being a decent side next season, giving a tough games to a lot of teams rather than just sitting in 17th. But they do have Champions League football, so I think they will be tired come the end of the season, and that's why I have them in 8th because I don't think they have the squad depth to really push on in the Premier League. But yeah, Tottenham in 8th. I think that's a great bounce back season for them, jumping up 9 spots. Headed over to 7th, where I have Brighton. This may come as a surprise to some people. I think Coppola is a great buy from Hellas Veronis, a center half with a lot of potential. Lose João Pedro, lose a Stupinan, lose Barco, lose a Dingra, but as well as Evan Ferguson, who actually looks great at Roma but hasn't really played. I think their biggest departure is João Pedro, but Kostulas, player with loads of potential. Tom Watson, player with loads of potential. Maximin the Quaper, player with loads of potential. You can see what Brighton are doing. They're just going back to their usual model. And I think Fabian Hertzler is a great manager to do that at the helm. I think he progresses a lot of attacking players. Maybe just needs solidity at that back line. But, I think they will be able to kick on in the Premier League this season. And you can see their important fixtures. It starts near the beginning of the season when you head over away to Everton. But then you host Man City, then you head over to Bournemouth, then you host Tottenham, away to Chelsea, then away to Wolves, then home to Newcastle, away to Manchester United. Yeah, I think if they're competitive in these games, I think if they beat Manchester United, draw against Newcastle, beat Wolves, beat Tottenham, beat Bournemouth, draw or lose to City, draw or lose to Chelsea, beat Everton, then they're very well off to kick on in this season. I think that's pretty much their most important run of fixtures to see, how much these incomings are really going to gel together. I think they've done great business in this window, but it's really about how Hertzler can get them to gel and how well they will be off headed forward. But I do think Brighton will have a great season. I think they will head into Europe and maybe even the Europa League because I do anticipate England getting 5 spots for the Champions League. But moving on to 6th place, and this is where maybe controversially, I don't know, I have Newcastle. Yeah, brought in Anthony Alenga, brought in Aaron Ramsdale on a loan transfer. Get rid of Lloyd Kelly, who you brought in for a fee for around 20 million, and then let go of Sean Longstaff to Leeds for around 14 million, and then lose Callum Wilson on a free to West Ham. But it's just been a disappointing summer for Newcastle, all things considered. Lose out on Shesko, lose out on Ekatike, you're losing Isak. Who else did you lose out on? João Pedro, Emblemo, Cunha. Yeah, just lost out on every single target you've gone after besides Anthony Alenga, which I think, Anthony Alenga was probably excited to come to Newcastle considering the project. Now it's probably just like, oh, losing Isak, don't have a striker. Maybe you get Nicholas Jackson through the door, which I fully expect out too. But you do have 10 very important fixtures spanning between February and May. And that is beginning with Tottenham away, which I expect you to win. Man City away. Then you have Everton at home, Man United at home, Chelsea away, Sunderland. Big derby game. Excited to see that in the Premier League this season. Crystal Palace away, Bournemouth at home, Arsenal away, and then Brighton at home. You see what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the top 6, or the big 6, I guess you can call it, because it's not the top 6, because I don't have Man United or Tottenham finishing in the top 6, but do have Man City, Chelsea, and Arsenal finishing in that top 6, top 5, I guess you could really say now. But yeah, very, very tough fixtures between February and May for Newcastle. It's just really about how they kick on, how they do in the Premier League this season. In these fixtures, I think is really going to determine if they get Champions League football or not. I don't think they'll perform too well in this. Obviously, already have Champions League football. Don't think their squad is deep enough to really go on a run in the Champions League. You're really going to have to prioritize either putting your all into the Champions League, not focusing on the Prem as much, or focusing on the Prem, not focusing too much on the Champions League, so you can, uh, you know, acquire Champions League football heading into next season. But yeah, I don't really know what Newcastle are going to prioritize, so that's why I have them in sixth. Headed over to fifth, and this is where I have Aston Villa. Um, no incomings, no outgoings really. Um, haven't really just done much business at all. But I think Villa have one of the best squads in the world. You saw that squad at the end of last season. It's pretty, you're looking at it and you're like, damn, this is a really good team. And Villa are a really good team, and I think Unai Emery is a great manager. And I kind of expect them to win the Europa League, to be honest. I think Unai Emery is a specialist in that competition, so we'll see how they do there. Um, for their important fixtures, it kind of starts at the beginning of the season, near the beginning of the season. Obviously, not August or September, but a couple months into the season. When you go away to Tottenham, but then you host Manchester City, go away to Liverpool, host Bournemouth, go away to Leeds, home to Wolves, excuse me, away to Brighton, and then home to Arsenal. The reason why I have this as your important fixtures list is, as you can see, all the fixtures on the left, those four games are all away. All those fixtures on the right, those are all at home. So you're chopping and changing, home and away for 8 straight games. I don't know if that streak continues or not. I cut it off after 8 games. I tried to, hone in on 8 to 10 games for these clubs, but you play 3 of the big 6 or 4 of the big 6. Excuse me, I forgot about Tottenham. Yeah, you play 4 of the big 6 in 8 games, and then you also have Bournemouth and Brighton, which I think are very tough fixtures. Um, yeah, I think Villa will have a very successful season. So I think they get Champions League football headed into 26-27, and I think they'll be able to keep hold of Morgan Rogers, Ollie Watkins, all those big names, and PSR won't be an issue anymore. So I see them finishing fifth, and winning the Europa League, which I think will be a very nice season for them. Head over to fourth. This may be a little controversial as well. I have Arsenal. Yeah, I have Arsenal. Um, on their incomings, I think Zubamendi's a great buy. I think he's a great midfielder. Gyökeres, I don't know. Looks a little heavy for the Premier League, as I've watched him as of recent. Nani Madueke, I don't really rate. Many people know this already. I'm not too big of a fan of Nani Madueke. I have plenty of match reviews on Chelsea, with Nani Madueke consisting in it. Christian Mosquera, I think, is a great buy. Young center half with loads of potential. I just don't know how much game time he will get because obviously you have Gabriel and Saliba already. Christian Norgard, I think, is a great depth center mid signing. I think a very talented player, just older, moved to Arsenal to be a squad player. He knows that too. And then you sign Kepa to be a backup goalkeeper to David Raya. Um, for their important fixtures, I have their North London derby kicking it off in February. Then you have a uh, London derby with Chelsea. Then you head away to Brighton. Then you have Everton. Then you head away to Wolves. Then home to Bournemouth. Then away to Man City. Then home to Newcastle. So they also have the mismatch that Aston Villa had in these important fixtures, with the four on the right being their home games, the four on the left being their away games. Away to Brighton's never easy. Away to Wolves, I expect a win. Away to Man City, I expect a loss. Home to Newcastle is never going to be easy. Home to Bournemouth, I expect a win. Home to Everton, I expect a win. Chelsea Arsenal, I expect it to be a good fixture, both sides. I think Arsenal at home to Chelsea is going to be a good game. I think Arsenal away to Chelsea is also going to be a very good game. And then North London Derby is always a North London Derby, but yeah, I don't really rate the business they've done this summer. Only letting go of 8 million euros. And spending 225 million euros on those players, I don't. I'm not a big fan, to be honest. Don't like Madueke at all, as a player. He just frustrates me when I watch him. But I'm not gonna say there's not a player in there because there definitely is. But it's just frustrating to watch at points, and I think Arsenal fans will understand that too. But he's gonna be very direct. He's gonna be one of your um, maverick attackers, which Arsenal desperately needs. So I understand the fit of Madueke going to Arsenal. He just frustrated me a lot at Chelsea. Gyökeres, again, I think heavy for the league, but I think once he's fit, once he's um, fully back into the swing of things, I think he will bang in some goals. I just I think Arsenal needs someone who's very good with their head, and I don't think Gyökeres quite does that. So that's why I'm a little skeptical on the deal, but. He will get you goals if you find him on along the ground, just not through the air. Zubamendi, a great midfielder who can move the ball very quickly. I think that will be a very good complement to Declan Rice, obviously, after Partey leaves. Don't even want to speak on his name, but you have to say he was integral to the way that Declan Rice was able to push up the pitch, and I think Zubamendi will do just that as well. But I don't know. Arteta's tactics just don't really excite me. It's too defensive. I think he really relies on defense rather than, hey, maybe we can outscore a team here, outscore a team there. It just, yeah, I don't really see the way that they win the league, and I think they're slowly just regressing. So I have them in fourth. Moving on to third. This is where I have my Chelsea. Um, yeah, our important run of fixtures also includes the London Derby against Arsenal, but started off with Burnley, which is should be at 3 points, but I'm technically starting it off with this London Derby against Arsenal. Then you go away to Villa, home to Newcastle, away to Everton, home to Man City, as well as home to Man United, away to Brighton, home to Nottingham Forest, and then away to Liverpool. So you can see that's, I'd say, five very tough fixtures. That's five of the top six. That don't include us in Arsenal, Newcastle, Villa, City, and Liverpool, all in the span between February and May. So it really depends on how Maresca and his team really set up in these games that dictates the ending to our season, because that is a very tough end to the season. I expect us to beat Man United at home. I expect us to beat Forest at home. I don't know about Everton away. I expect a win against Newcastle at home. I expect a win against Burnley, but you know, really tough fixtures. But we can talk about the incomings. I think we've done great business this summer, letting go of Madueke for 56 million euros, Joao Felix for 30 plus another 20 to go all the way up to 50, George Petrovic for 29, Leslie Ugochukwu for 29, KDH for basically 29 as well. And then you also had Amanda Broya, who left for 20 million pounds, so around like 23 million euros, I believe. You let Amugu go to your sister club in Strasbourg, Bashir Humphreys also to Burnley for 14 million, and then Kepa release clause as well as Bettinelli to Manchester City. Then you loan out Penrith Pies and Star to Strasbourg, Guiu to Sunderland, as well as Bergstrom leaving to Mallorca on a free young goalkeeper there. I don't know if he's really going to play. Um, on the incomings, I think this is where we've done most of our best business. Kendrick Paz, we know, has been coming in for a while, as well as Esteval, Asugo, and Sar. They're all pre-agreements. So we're going to talk about the top four. I think the Lab is a great buy. Obviously paid the release clause to Ipswich. I think Jarrell Hato is decent Cucurella depth. May even play less center half. I actually had Chelsea in second, but the news about Levi Colwill tearing his ACL came out, and I didn't feel comfortable putting them all the way that high. Really gutting, but I think Jarrell Hato will be able to step in that left center half position. And then you get Gatens to play on the left wing. I think he'll be a very exciting player there. And then you get João Pedro, who has already kicked on very well in the Club World Cup, as well as Delap has too. So, really intrigued there. And then, of course, you have the big name Esteval. Gonna probably see him, as today is Chelsea's first preseason match back from the Club World Cup against Leverkusen. So, maybe he does feature. Maybe Gatens, Hato, Delap, and Pedro all feature as well. Maybe Asugo as well. But yeah, I think Chelsea have done very good business, pretty equal in terms of incomings and outgoings in terms of the money. 280 to 208, 209. Um, so yeah, fair play to Chelsea for the business this summer. I think it's been excellent compared to previous summers. I think it doesn't rival the likes of a Liverpool, but I think they've done probably their best business since Win Stewart has been in charge. So that's why I have them in third, because I think their squad is deep enough to go on a run in both the Champions League as well as the Premier League. Moving on to second, this is where I have Manchester City. In the incomings, you have Tiani Reinders, who I think is a great buy. Ryan Nori, also a great buy. Ryan Cherky, great buy. Both Algerians. They share the same name. Naipan, one of the wonder kids in FM. I think most of y'all probably love him if you do have him in FM. One of my favorite wonder kids to use. Plays center mid, but headed to Manchester City from Rosenborg. I don't know what they'll do with him. Maybe loan him out to a Girona or something like that. And then you have James Trafford. Um, Headed from Burnley for 32 million, who may be your starting goalkeeper. On the outgoings, Young Kuto goes to Dortmund for 20 million pound or 20 million euros, excuse me. Big departure in Kevin De Bruyne, who leaves to Napoli on a free, just wasn't really at that level anymore, as well as Kyle Walker, leaving to Burnley, who also just wasn't at that level anymore. And then you have Maximo Perron to Como for 13 million euros. Their important fixtures consist of ties against Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea, and Arsenal. If you want to go in order, it's uh, Man City versus Liverpool, then Fulham, then Newcastle, then Leeds, then Forest, then West Ham, then Crystal Palace, then Chelsea, then Arsenal, then Burnley. So the reason why I deem this to be important is you have three of the top four in there, excluding yourself. So pretty much every single team other than yourselves in the top four you do play in this run of games. Chelsea away, I think is going to be a very difficult fixture. I think Newcastle is a very tough game. regardless of where it's being played at. I think Liverpool away is as well. I think that's going to be one of the main title deciders, to be honest. I think Arsenal at home is always going to be a tough fixture. Arsenal are always going to play very defensive. Burnley should be 3 points. Crystal Palace is always a bogey game. That's why I included them in this as well. Forest, I expect to win. West Ham, maybe a bogey game, maybe not. We'll see how they progress throughout the season. Fulham's a bogey game. I think West Ham should be a comfortable win for Man City as well as Leeds. But again, two bogey games between Fulham and Crystal Palace, and then four very hard games between Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, and Liverpool. So that's, you know, 6 out of the 10 there, and then Burnley away. Even Nottingham Forest at home could be a little bit of a bogey game as well. So you have 7 out of 10 there, and then you have three decently easy games in Burnley, West Ham, and Leeds United. But it really depends how they kick on in these 10 fixtures. I think if they want to come near the title, but I do expect them to be a lot more competitive this year than they were last year. Because it is Manchester City, they will be back. And then lastly, to win the title, I do have Liverpool. Um, yeah, I think it's pretty much inevitable. Their business this season has just been absolutely tremendous. I love Ekatike as a player. I talked about him when Chelsea were linked to him, but Liverpool ended up getting that deal across the line. You get Florian Wirtz. Obviously, Kwanzaa went the other way, but you do have a buyback there. Milos Kerkez comes through the door. Frimpong comes through the door. Obviously, you lose Trent Alexander-Arnold. You replace him with Frimpong, which I don't know how good Frimpong will be defensively, but you know, yet to be seen. I do think he has the physicality as well as the pace to do well in the Premier League. But Alexander-Arnold to Real Madrid. Kelleher, your backup goalkeeper, to Brentford. Um, Obviously, you have Mamardashvili as your backup goalkeeper now, who I think is great. Um, you have Kwanzaa headed out to Leverkusen, which I talked about. You have Luis Diaz to Bayern Munich, and then you now have Darwin Nunez out to Al Hilal. So, this is me expecting Liverpool to be able to get Isak through the door as well. I think they will. I think Ekatike is going to be on the left, Florian Wirtz through the right or through the middle, Salah through the right, Isak up top, and I think that's easily the best attack in the league. And then you have Kirkish, Van Dijk, Konate, and Frimpong behind them with a midfield two of Gravenberch and McAllister. I think that's easily the best squad in the league. So, I pretty much expect them to dog walk this league. In terms of their tough fixtures, I have them at home to Bournemouth. Um, I think this is the start of the season for Liverpool. It's at home to Bournemouth, away to Newcastle, home to Arsenal, um, away to Burnley, which is easy 3 points. Merseyside derby, away to Crystal Palace, and then away to Chelsea and home to Man United. So you can see two very big rivalry games in there in Everton and Manchester United, and then you have another big rivalry game away to Chelsea as well as home to Arsenal, and then Newcastle away is never an easy fixture, so that's I'd say five very tough games to start the season out, but I do expect them to do very well in the Premier League and kick on very well. So yeah, I do have them lifting the title for the second year in a row. Um, and that is my Premier League predictions. If you disagree with any of my predictions, please let it be known in the comments section. A review of the preseason fixture between Chelsea and Bayer Leverkusen will be out later today. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, it's Repulse, and I'm out. Peace.